Good evening, everyone. This is the January 10th, 2019 Town of Monroe Planning Board Workshop meeting. I'd like to wish everybody a happy and healthy and prosperous new year before we start. Noreen, will you take the roll call, please?
Yes. Anthony McCarroll.
Here.
Lisa McQuaid.
Here.
Bonnie Franson. Here. James McKnight.
Present.
Jason Sorinsky.
Here.
Jeff Manson.
Here.
And John Allegro.
Here.
All right, and with that, we have a quorum. I'd like to point out the fire exits. There is one, the main entry where we come in. There's another over by the kitchen, and then there is a third behind me by this exit sign. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to officially welcome John Allegro, who is sitting at the end of our table as our newest planning board member here. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Look forward to working with you.
And likewise.
All right. With that, I would also like to make a motion so that we can appoint an acting chairman for the 2019 year. And I would like to nominate Jeff Manson again, if he's willing to accept the position.
Yes.
Very good. With that, I'll make a motion to appoint Jeff as acting chairman. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Motion carries. Jeff is our acting chairman. We also need to pass a resolution appointing our attorney for the 2019 calendar year. I would like to make a motion that we retain Mike Donnelly of Dickover, Donnelly and Donovan as our planning board attorney for 2019. May I have a second?
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. And our last resolution action item for this evening is to make a motion to retain our planning board engineer. And I make a motion to retain Mark Edsel and his firm, McGoey Hauser and Edsel Consulting Engineers, as the planning board engineer for 2019. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you all. You're welcome. Thank you for serving us.
Second that, right?
Who seconded the last motion?
I did. It was you. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. It was good to hear you.
So with that, the first item on our agenda is Mikvah Yisroel. Anyone here yet? Isaac's not here yet? All right. So we will skip him for the moment. And we will move on to Lakeside Subdivision. Do we have anyone here for Lakeside?
Is that the one that is now called Meadow Hill or no?
Nope.
No. No?
So,
All right.
Lakeside and Kingsville are not here.
All right.
Meadow
So,
Hill is
lucky you, Meadow Hill Subdivision. You're up, Joe. Good evening.
Good evening.
All right. So why don't you tell us where you are in the process?
Okay, as you recall, we've had one meeting here to review the sketch plan. It's an 8-lot subdivision. It's got full frontage on Lakes Road. It's pretty much across the street from the solar,
The old landfill?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we were here for one meeting. There were a few requests that you had asked us to do, some minor modifications to the EAF, which we've taken care of. You also asked us to prepare a resource plan, which we submitted. There's, a couple of wetlands in the interior of the property, really no slopes to speak of. So we did prepare the resource plan, and I guess we're here this evening to, I also want to update you, I believe, I told you the last time we were here that I thought that the wetlands were delineated. They were not at that time. I have to go check. I've spoken to our wetland consultant, which is in our country.
Okay.
And if they're not out there this week, they'll probably be out there next week.
Okay. We're getting, just, I'm sorry, Joe, we're getting feedback. Do you know who it might be? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
And so, the other thing that we had done was we provided site distances on all the driveways so that the plans could hopefully be sent to the County Department of Public Works for their initial review.
So I guess one of my first questions is, how many lots are we talking about?
There are 8 lots.
Okay, so this is considered a major subdivision?
Yes.
All right, so I believe as a result, we also need to look at the conventional lot layout because we also need to consider a cluster layout as well.
Yes.
Although I acknowledge this is an oddly shaped, narrow parcel, so how and to what extent we could cluster is a question, but I think the first part of the process is to look at the natural resources, make sure that the conventional could have been essentially approved based on all the Monroe zoning regulations and reasonable assumptions with regard to other permits, et cetera, that would have been required.
Okay.
And then once we have our yield, then we have to consider a cluster layout. So at this point, I don't know, Mark or Mike, have you had a chance to take a look at this? And is there additional information that's needed to look at the conventional layout to establish a yield?
Joe has submitted a sketch plan, which is effectively the conventional layout. And you can surmise from reviewing the plan that he has, for the lots that have the unfortunate benefit of the wetlands, those are the largest lots. His other lots are reduced in size to reflect those areas that have the most usable soils. In my initial review, I indicated that the most restricted portion of the subdivision was the access, and Joe has added site distances. I don't know whether or not part of the determination if the conventional plan is viable is whether or not the driveways are possible, but it would seem to me that that might be.
Anything's possible for money.
Because as far as I see it, the wetlands are, although they're significant, they're less, in my mind, of a burden as to the possible restrictions for access, although the site distances are pretty good. So I think that is something that before we determine if the plan is an acceptable conventional plan, we may want to get it out to Orange County DPW.
Yeah, the test is not really possible, it's whether it's approvable. And
Right.
while that verb is not that easy to figure out what it means, I don't think it means a full level of detail, but it has to be the sort of a layout that you would approve details aside.
As an
Right.
example, when we review conventional plans, we look at, can you get the roads in? Can you get the roads in with slope? Can you accomplish the grading? Are the houses accessible with the preliminary road layout? Well, here, they're not building any roads, but the driveways are the difficulty. So I would think that using the term approvable, the question becomes, could you develop 8 lots in this stretch of, I believe it's 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, and meet the county standards?
And this is on well and septic.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Again, wetlands, they have been confirmed or they haven't been confirmed?
They are being, well, our wetland consultant said that they're very close, but they're old, so, they're being reflagged.
So they're being reflagged, and are they being sent to Army Corps for a jurisdictional determination, or?
If it's required,
Okay.
sure. I mean,
The-
we most likely are going to get a jurisdictional determination letter.
The reason I ask is that then if you weren't going to, at this point, look for jurisdictional determination, I think we would find out whether Mark or someone could go out and do a review of the wetland delineation to see if it's reasonable.
Okay.
Are all areas that are in fact wetland being shown? Is this conservative? Is this, is this fully showing all the wetlands that may be present? So I think, again, we would retain someone unless you're going to actually, pursue a JD.
Well, if we do pursue a JD, our contract is to get a jurisdictional determination.
Okay,
And another layer on top of the Army Corps delineation is the local wetland law, Chapter 56 of the
Right.
town code. So there might be areas that are affected by that code as well.
right, so we need to make sure that this is doable from the wetland permit perspective, from the local law on the books. I have just kind of a context question. So this property is owned by Meadow Hill LLC. Is it related in any way to the property to the back? Are they the same ownership?
I don't know. I know that there's the same ownership of a piece that's adjacent to the back piece. It's actually, if you take a look at the location map,
Yep, I have it up
see
there.
the word camp on Camp Monroe,
Yep, I see it.
that parcel right there. I don't know if it's the same ownership, but it's the same person that, I don't know if it's the same LLC, but they're the same owners.
Okay, so I'm looking at, so this, the town boundary between town of Chester and town of Monroe is essentially splitting this parcel, and it created is this a separate tax parcel and a separate deeded parcel as well?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Okay. And from a history perspective, this was in front of the board before, wasn't it, or no? Was this when the Belleville project was proposed?
There was a portion of it in the town of Monroe, whether it was this lot or not, we'd have to look at the old map.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when it was the big overall project, which I don't think is alive or in process at all. Was this part of the development? Were there lots proposed here? Do you recall?
I wasn't involved with it, so I have no idea.
Okay. That was Dave Ziegler's office, I guess, perhaps, at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, there were some old Blanket Tully surveys, so they may have been involved.
I can tell you're Dave Ziegler.
Yeah, we saw survey maps.
Okay.
Blanket Tully, so they may have been involved.
Okay. So, and what I'm getting at, board members, is I'm just curious, and I'd like to reach out to Chester. I don't think there's any application right now in front of the town of Chester, but once upon a time, I think the property in Monroe was attached and part of an overall development for a larger piece of property that's in the town of Chester. So I just want to make sure that that's a dead project, because
And
that
there was-
opens the door to potential, I don't know if it opens the door to
And I think
potential
there was a
alternative
draft
access.
environmental impact statement on that project, so if we could get a hold of it, if this property was involved, I think you'd want to see that study.
Right. So the question I ask with regard to the adjoining ownership is simply, you're going to have various accesses coming out onto Lakes Road. Could there have been a better way of getting to those parcels without having to go through Lakes Road if there was, the same ownership in some way? So that was what I'm thinking with regard to that. Steep slopes, were there any? Are those shown?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
You barely see them because they're the shaded areas. They're 30% or more. They're just little splotches here and there.
Okay. All right. And then we also have a tree conservation commission, Monroe Conservation Commission looks at the trees on the site, so I think we're going to need information there. I don't know that that necessarily affects your yield, but I think in terms of layout, we're also going to want to do coordinated review, the DEC and others, to get the ball rolling on terms of, seeker and other environmental features that may be present on the site.
Are you going to begin that coordination after they've perhaps developed a cluster plan, or just if you determine cluster plan is not viable, you can go with the conventional plan, but it's capable of proceeding based on access?
Right.
Is that when you begin that process?
I think so, because if this isn't okay from, the county's perspective, then,
I'd rather not send them multiple plans, I'd rather do a
Right.
viable one.
right,
One thing I did not plan on doing was any soils evaluations as part of the determination of the conventional plan, because ultimately, once it settles in as far as the layout, it's going to go to Orange County Department of Health as a realty subdivision, so we wouldn't be performing those reviews, and I wouldn't want to burden the applicant with double reviews, if that's acceptable to the board.
I don't think that we need to necessarily look at soils. And I guess the one question would be, if the soils aren't adequate, are there systems that are above ground that the county would accept so that it's really not an issue from a yield perspective?
I think we'll find that out. They'll lose lots, most likely, when they get to the county.
Have you done any perk tests yet or any soil testing?
Just looked at the soils maps.
Okay.
Soils maps are adequate.
So no tests yet, okay. The only other thing I see is, it almost looks like there's a little, I don't know if this is a intermittent stream. I'm almost looking at something here on the topo. I don't know if you could see that, Joe, coming in this way. See on lot 3? The way that the topo is showing, it almost suggests there might be like a little stream coming in this way. So I don't know. So I think, Mark, from my perspective,
It's actually kind of a high point.
is it coming up this way? Okay, so maybe it's coming down this way, perhaps. I don't know, I'd like to get out to the field to see this. But in general, I think, Mark, what we would want to see is making sure that, as shown, the septic system locations and the wells would meet separation
Oh, we'll check
distances.
that.
Yeah,
Check that.
so that,
Not soils testing.
correct. Joe, from your perspective, as far as doing a cluster and maybe putting wetlands in, on a larger lot or preserving them, we are dealing with septics and wells here.
Right.
To what extent can one, and it'll be a question ultimately for Mark too, to what extent can one tighten up a little bit this layout?
I was anticipating that, hopefully move things along. I actually had a couple of different ideas. Pass these out if it's okay.
Okay, yeah.
And what these lots,
Thank you.
I didn't print them on large sheets. What we did here, I just looked, I created 2 different alternates of open space where we can put all the wetlands into open space.
Okay.
And I actually have a larger scale, so I can actually use the numbers. But what happens is the total lot area is 13 acres. And what we've done on both layouts, 6.92 and 7 acres, we were able to put in open space. And what that does, we actually proposed some cluster development, bulk requirements. The lots go as small as 0.63 acres. The lot lists are 100 foot wide. The side yards drop down to 50, but we maintain the front and rear yards to the actual original zoning.
So is it really the size, is it the lot width that gets affected mostly?
Yes, the side yards and lot width. Yeah, what we were able to do is we were able to put 7 of the 8 lots to the east.
Okay. So at this point in time, in and among the wetlands, you have one on the conventional 1, 2, 3, 4 that are sort of in and among that system.
Correct.
And what you're showing is that if ultimately we determine this is your yield, you could go with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on one side with one retaining the bulk of the open space. Or
That's correct.
alternatively, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you're saying,
Either way.
and one at the other end, right?
We
Okay.
prefer alternate 1, just because it sits higher. The lot is deeper in the
Okay.
area. It really narrows down as you head west.
So the lot, if you went with the second alternative, that's not offering as much of, you think, an area?
Well,
for
that last lot, which is lot number 1, is just it's just a tighter lot, that's all.
What's the size?
It's the only advantage for lot.
.89.
Alternate 2 is the worst sight distance across the entire frontage.
Right.
Generally in the area of conventional lot 3, which is somewhat close to the lot on alternate.
Yeah, we have no, correct.
So
I mean,
the county DPW may, in their review, prefer alternate 2, because alternate 2 does in fact have better overall sight distance.
In terms of shared driveways, we allow shared driveways?
We let driveways come out parallel to each other,
Okay,
but not shared internal to the lot.
not internal to the lot. That's a definite.
Does that apply to the curb cut as well?
No, these
way they're
paired
configured.
curb cuts are fine. It's not having a shared driveway on private property.
Got it.
So when you're in the right of way, there's shared access.
And that's in the code? Or that,
Highway spec.
highway specs? Okay.
and I'm anticipating the county will prefer that as well.
They generally do.
I think everybody would prefer that, just to have fewer. There's no way at all to get almost like a parallel lane in the front, is there? So you have one access? I mean, I've seen it in other subdivisions, but again, this is very narrow. So I don't know with your septic and your wells, whether you could get almost like a buffer in the front that maybe would be like a 10-foot strip for vegetation, and then an actual lane that isn't very wide, but then you would maybe only have maybe 1 or 2 access points.
The difficulty in that is that with a 55-mile-an-hour zone, when you have, at night especially, opposing traffic 10 feet off, it's very confusing for drivers. So I'm sure that the county would have a concern about that. Because as you're driving, if somebody was coming up that lane, there'd be a car running almost parallel to you, opposing you on the right side, which,
Well, then have maybe 2 access points and it goes one way all the time, parallel with the, or am I making it too difficult?
then you have to.
I'm just trying to think of
I'm
ways
just
to
trying-
reduce the number of curb
I mean,
cuts.
that would only reduce it by 1.
Yeah.
It would go from 3
1,
to
2,
2.
3, 4, 5 to 2. I mean, if it could be done in 1, but I don't know if
I
our
would
code
only
would
be-
even allow it.
We would only be able to do it along lots 5 through 8.
What about something crazy like, I'm just throwing ideas out there.
Because of the wetlands, we couldn't run it along the whole frontage.
Is it, what's the steepness in here, in general? Where that knoll is? Maybe 15?
Yeah, between 10 and 15%.
Okay, so it's not too bad. Could you get a single, almost like, do we allow private roads?
There are private roads, yes.
Can-
Maximum of 6 lots,
Ugh.
2 have to have frontage on public road.
Could you do a private road that goes to the rear of these lots? And then the driveway would attach from the back?
I don't know the feasibility of that just because of the depth of the lot itself.
Yeah, I don't know. So basically, so let's say for the lots that are over here, you would be coming in somewhere and go around the back with like a little, and I don't know what our private road specs are. I would hope that they're not 50-foot right-of-way. I don't know what they are, so I don't know if it's feasible. You may need to look at private road specs in the future.
They were looked at for a particular reason, that there's many times that people look to upgrade a private road.
Yeah, and
It's
then
a hardship not having the proper right-of-way when
Yeah.
you lay it out.
We deal with a lot of rural areas where private driveways, shared driveways, they may have like 20 feet, of right-of-way, because the town never, ever wants to take them over, so they don't want the 50 feet of right-of-way. So I was just thinking, a shared, if it wasn't 50-foot right-of-way, if it didn't have to be a wide road, could you get literally like a little lane in the back here?
The state code requires 26 foot for the Uniform Building Code.
26 for the
For
actual,
access of emergency vehicles. So the old 20-foot lanes are a thing of the past.
okay. Is that throughout, or is it
That's the New York State.
the new, or has it been a while?
The A couple of years old.
Okay. All right, well, again, I was just trying to think of ways to minimize maybe the number of curb cuts we have because it is a 55-mile-an-hour road.
And the county used to have a specification for intersections on the road profile that they wanted -2% from the road, so that would increase your slope onto the property.
Yeah, I don't see any problems with that. Well, we're gonna have to provide profiles to the county. This area here, the site distance is fantastic. You know, so these lots, the site distance is in excess of 800 feet.
Okay,
Yeah, on the far end, all the way to the left on the
This
plan.
is really the issue.
It's another.
this one here?
Yeah.
Okay.
This must be the old plan.
This is the one I
It
had,
doesn't show the site distances.
okay.
All the way to the left, it's 634 and 800. So all the way to the left, and then all the lots along the right straight section have pretty good site
Yeah,
distances.
this is the only one where we are proposing some
Right in here.
some grading and vegetation looking to the east.
Okay. Please look also at our code. We have a scenic roads provision, and the scenic roads, though, are actually listed in the comp plan. And we have requirements to keep vegetation between the road and the building. That, I think it's something like half the otherwise required front yard setback to try and keep vegetated.
What is it, scenic roads?
It's a scenic road provision in the town zoning, but the roads actually aren't listed there, they're listed in the comp plan. I could actually probably bring it up. I'm just gonna see quick if it's here still. Comp plan. Hopefully this won't take too long. Because in my mind, I'm thinking lakes may be one of them. Because of the views that you have of some of the mountains that are going into the park. Let's see if it comes up.
You also notice those lots, 5 through 8, you could move those back, which we could actually increase the setbacks on really all of them, if need be, with the exception of lot number 1.
So scenic roads is 57-21.4, just so you know, Joe.
I'm sorry, 50.
57-21.4 scenic roads. And it talks about creating the scenic buffer zone. So standards include designed to maximize number of lots which gain access from a road internal to a new subdivision rather than the scenic road. Approved location of all driveways to access the scenic road, limiting the clearing of any vegetation within the scenic buffer zone or within the public right-of-way. May require shared entrances of adjoining driveways, which is what's happening here. Supplemental landscaping may be required. Map notes are to be added, which designates the scenic buffer zone. Stormwater ponds, electric utility boxes, other utilities shall not be located within the scenic buffer zone unless there's no alternative location. Keep as much vegetation, stone walls, mature trees, and tree rows as possible. Can require utilities to be underground, etc. So let's see here.
Yeah, Lakes Road is covered.
It is covered? You found it? Okay, great. So that's the standard that we'll have to adhere to. So wetlands, scenic roads. And again, it's really more about the landscaping.
Okay.
You know, keeping the vegetation as natural as possible. So with that, this is a workshop meeting, so we're not taking really any actions, but should we well, we can't contemplate yet circulating for lead agency until we're a little more advanced as far as which layout may be pursued.
I would think so. I don't know that the intent is to circulate multiple choice
Yeah,
for seeker, and that's really where we're at right
Right.
now. So I would believe that the board should shake out the alternative that best suits the land,
right.
and then circulate.
So the one thing Joe, have you contacted DEC? Have you just sent out a letter in general about the property to get feedback, species, et cetera?
Just a mapper.
Just using environmental resource mapper? Okay. So I think maybe we'll send just a letter to DEC, just to get just to know in advance, for sure, beyond the EAF, what, creatures may be there that we have to consider. I'm going to guess Indiana bat's one of them.
Right.
Take a look at the tree requirements as far as the decibel, the diameter, breast height, tree requirement, what's required to be shown. Although having said that, I don't know that you should need to map them out now because we haven't gotten the layout really
No, cluster
defined,
conventional.
right?
Gotcha.
So I think it's reasonable not to do a tree survey if the actual layout's, in flux. Because otherwise you'd have to basically look at the entire site for trees. Those are some of my comments. Board members, what are your thoughts as far as the subdivision, the layout? Have you had a chance to visit the site? Anybody? No? Okay. Did this go to Monroe Conservation Commission, the plan?
Not as of yet.
Okay.
You want
Let's,
the one that I have?
yeah, let's send the plan over to them just so they can go out and take a look at the site. They do that for us and they can give us comments back. And we will look at,
Is there a different one than the one I have as of?
you were just mentioning there's one with site distances on it.
11/28/18 is the last revision.
Yeah, that's the one that I have in the office.
Okay. I just must have an older digital version.
Oh, I just read whatever was on the machine that I had in my email.
Okay. Mark, any other comments? Or Mike, any other comments?
Not now.
Okay. Joe?
Yeah, just a quick question. So the board is going to send this to DPW? Or do I do that?
I
What
think
has
their
been-
policy is they want to see it come from.
I was gonna say it comes from us normally.
Because it sounds like nothing's going to move ahead until we get input from them. At least that's the way it's understanding to me.
I almost wonder, since there are alternatives, if a meeting with Orange County DPW would be more fruitful. Because if we send out the conventional plan and not show them the alternatives that are being looked at, they may have negative comment on the conventional layout when in fact you're considering a cluster that
Right.
would put the lots at the maximum available site distance. Joe, maybe reach out to them and see if they'd be willing to have a meeting with you and myself and
Okay.
them, a concept meeting, so that maybe we can bring back to the board some
Right.
preliminary thoughts of the county DPW. And then we'll send them the plan that perhaps has their blessing and the board's blessing, and once you decide which one you want to move forward on, that's the one we can send to them.
How tight are you on these lots with meeting the minimum requirements for the lot area?
Well, we have the net area calculations. There's really, as I said, lots 5 through 8, there's really no restrictions.
Okay.
At all. So really, the net areas were removed from lots 1 through 4, and which was basically wetlands. You see, there's very little slopes.
So it looks like lot 5 is 1.08. That's pretty tight.
Yes. Yep. They're all
1.03 on lot 6. Lot 7, 1.02. Lot 8, 1.01. So with that, I just want to make sure that all the slopes have been calculated and again, the wetland,
Yep.
that we have a final wetland, because if that wetland changes, that could get you underneath the conventional lot
sure.
area minimum. So,
Why don't we wait till Joe has the confirmed wetland?
mhm,
Get a hold of me, we may make a visit with DPW,
mhm.
and then perhaps the next appearance, all the information will be available.
And then maybe if someone in your office this is the digital version, is this scaled? Is there a scale on your
Oh, yeah, yep,
So the electronic version is scaled.
absolutely.
And just to make sure that all the steep slopes are accurate. Maybe someone in your office, Mark, can take care of
Take a
that.
look at it.
Yep. All right. So I think to get to the conventional yield, we just need the wetlands really honed in on and finalized. And again, Joe, if you want us to retain someone to do a wetland check, we could do that. Otherwise, if you're going to do the JD anyway, then we'll wait for you.
Okay, you know what, I'll check with him, I'll see.
Yeah, find out what the preference is. So in other words, board members, we would retain a wetland scientist to determine whether these are reasonable. And if they're both in agreement, then we're not going to worry about the JD, at least at this point. And actually, I don't think you're not looking for a nationwide. You're not proposing any
No,
disturbances,
no,
so.
I'm proposing no disturbance.
Right, so you wouldn't even need a JD.
Right.
So let us know, Joe.
Okay, nice one.
All right. Any other comments? No? All right.
So Tuesday, will the board be making any action?
I don't believe so. I think you're gonna have your conversations with DPW,
Okay.
and you'll let us know about the wetlands.
Okay, so we're not gonna circulate until
We
know
have-
that we're
yeah,
circulating.
yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yep,
Right, any need for me to be here Tuesday?
I don't think so.
I wouldn't think so.
All right.
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
You built part of the record, by the way, Liz.
okay, great.
No,
I gave no All right, let's go back to the beginning, see if we've had any other individuals come in. So for discussion, again, the first item on the agenda was Mikvah Yisroel. Good evening. Hiya. Good evening. Could you introduce yourselves for the record?
Good evening, my name is Isaac Walter. I have with me Tom Cusick, board engineer. The reason why we are here tonight is we got that approval, I think more than a year ago, for the Mikvah project, and the resolution we got it approved that we're going to use the well at the Mikvah site. But at the end, the health department didn't want we should use the well because we had issues with it. So then we went back and forth trying to gather the idea what to use. So then we realized we're going to use the well what we have across the city by the Glenwood School. So Tom Cusick will explain the whole experience with that.
Yes, Tom Cusack from WSP, formerly Lake Everett Graham. The proposal is to actually connect the proposed mikvah with the mikvah building to the existing Glenwood water supply source, which consists of a bedrock well. It's not, in the aspect of the project team, it's not, a new thought process. It was originally in the game plan or the thought process of developing an individual well on the facility or connecting actually to the Glenwood facility. Multiple challenges initially in siting a well on the mikvah site, getting variances due to sanitary control radiuses and so on and so forth. But we certainly got past that and developed a water supply well. Approximately a year ago or so, the well was resampled and it indicated an elevated chloride concentration over the drinking water standard of 250 milligrams per liter. The well was resampled and the following sample was under the drinking water standard. So what happened was we took a few months and took multiple samples to get a better understanding of it, and in a general sense, most of the sampling events are exceeding the drinking water standard. it's likely attributed to road salt application to Route 17, which is immediately adjacent to, obviously, the well. And it's not uncommon, as I have been studying wells in the county for 30 years, I'm seeing more and more wells that are along the Route 17 corridor that are being impacted by road salt. It's a cumulative impact, basically. And to kind of support my thought process of that, it was considered in the past by the project team in April of 4th of 2017, a pump test report, a revised and additional pump test report was submitted to the planning board for the additional phase, the second school building at the site. And we actually, we conducted that pump test on that well. And that test was conducted in March of 2017. We conducted that pump test at 10 GPM. And it was conducted at 10 GPM due to the fact that the water demands for the, hold on one second.
Mark, do you have all these reports that are being referenced?
I believe there were reports submitted for the Glenwood 2 proposal, but if there's anything new beyond that, I don't know that we have it.
Yes.
I'd have to check.
Yes, this report was submitted, and in addition, following a presentation to the planning board, there was a request as a follow-up, which basically summarizes some questions, basically, that the board had.
Tom, was that the report that was submitted to support the ability of the existing system to support Glenwood 2?
Yes.
Could you
The
provide?
the date of the reports would be April 4th, 2017, Mark.
Okay.
And with a follow-up, and following a presentation to the planning board, there were several questions from planning board members, Mark, and I addressed those comments in a report dated April 19th, 2017.
So those should be with the planning
Yeah.
board? Okay. I just want to make sure we had the dates
Yeah.
so that Mark can
Yeah.
check. Thank you.
So as I indicated, that test was conducted in Glenwood School in March. And it indicated a safe yield of 10 GPM. And so what it met the water demand of 5.6 for the existing school and the phase 2 portion of the school. And it also would meet the water demands of the mikveh at 3.06 GPM. And the well was tested at 10. So the goal was that when we did the test at that time, we were making sure that if we chose to connect the mikveh, that we demonstrated adequate water.
Did any of the reports from 2017 reference the support of the mikveh or just Glenwood 1 and
Just
Glenwood 2?
Glenwood, yes.
So just to make it clear, the planning board reviewed the ability to support Glenwood 1 and Glenwood 2. No discussion on any off-site services.
Okay.
So that's the change we're here about.
Okay. So is there now a report that looks at all three, an up-to-date report? Or a memo?
Yeah, yes, one that was submitted to the health department.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, and I believe, is that being submitted to the town?
There was a report submitted to the health department for the connection in 6 months ago, approximately, Mark. We received comments, we just responded, and it was just resubmitted today.
Yeah, the town received no information. Ben has nothing as well.
Okay, so at this point, Health Department,
Mark, I do have a summary of today that I prepared to give you my request.
okay.
That's summarized. It's basically it's the April report, which just incorporates the discussion of the mikveh, and the conclusions are, well, the water demand section discusses it, and then in the conclusion summarizes.
Okay, so thoughts include, is the mikveh located on a separate parcel? Different from the school?
Yes.
Okay. So I know I saw something come from Brian Nugent. I don't know if that was associated with what we're looking at, but there has to be some kind of agreement between parties to ensure that when they're on separate parcels, that water is going to be provided continuously to the operation of that facility. It's one thought. Second thought is, so at this point, you don't have Orange County Department of Health approval. You're awaiting Orange County Department of Health approval.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, however, we've had the discussion of interconnection, and we have the okay to proceed with the design of it. So they're
Okay.
accepting of the thought process. It's just obviously, Mark knows, you have to show them the design.
And do we have a letter to that effect, or any letter?
We've got nothing.
Okay. Was there a letter that says to move forward with design, or that was just a discussion at Orange County Health Department?
Just a discussion, yes.
So nothing
To proceed,
formalized?
that we were, yes, to proceed with it. They
Okay.
embraced the thought and to proceed, yes.
Okay. And then the third thought is that there was a site plan approval issued for the mikvah, which has to be amended because it's obviously the water source is going to be different.
You've actually got both site plans affected, so you really should go on record with both the Glenwood site plan and the mikvah site plan indicating that there are modifications to the water system.
Okay. So we need to amend 2 resolutions. So
And-
I know I have here resolution of approval, second amended, January 10th, 2019. This is for mikvah,
Israel.
so this is the one that's been edited. Do we have one for Glenwood as well?
No, I can
Okay.
prepare one by next week, but no.
Okay.
The other document we need, which Brian is aware of, as you've seen in the communications via email, there was a license agreement executed between the town and mikvah to permit the force main of their sanitary sewer to cross the town road and run onto the Glenwood School to access the county sewer. Now the license agreement needs to be revised so that it provides for water and sewer within the town road.
So so that is an agreement that has to occur with the town.
And Brian's aware of it.
Okay, and so then I'm also asking as a separate, we need to see some kind of agreement between all parties.
And I don't know where they put the water line. We don't have any as-built, so we need to find out if there are any easements needed. There was an easement created for the sewer to access the county sewer. We don't know where the water main runs from the Glenwood site to the mikveh site. So that water line may or may not be in easements. So there may need to be easements created for that. So we've got no as-built.
So is there anything that you have, can you supply as-built or drawings of where the water lines are?
Yeah.
We have a plan, we have a site plan for the water connection. I think Mark, you saw that, signed.
But I don't know that we've got easements or any other documents, so. I think they really need to do is make a complete package submittal instead of emails and pieces, and we need to get a complete submittal with all the documents. I know they're coordinating with Brian now. The key thing is the health department. If the health department writes off on it, everything else will fall into place.
Can we back up on the agreement with the shared water service?
Yeah, at planning board members, please raise whatever questions or comments you have.
Is there an example of that in our town now?
I'm not aware of one.
And is there an example in other municipalities of that? Or, I mean, I'm concerned about one lot owner depending on another lot owner for water service.
Related to that, can I just ask a quick question? Where is the well in question that has the chlorides that you're referring to? If you could show it on this map, approximately where it is? Where the mikvah site is and where the well would be. If you need me to move this around, let me know. I can also zoom out a little.
Yeah. The well is approximately, yeah. You can see it within close proximity to Route 17 corridor.
Is this going downhill here? Is that a slope down?
Yes.
Okay.
It's relatively flat and then slopes off.
Okay.
And the well for the school is at a significant distance from Route 17 corridor.
Where's that?
Like
There, okay. And you have to run utility lines from here to connect, or where is the utility line in general, the water line?
So it comes out of the existing school facility,
Okay,
and this is the water line.
okay,
And runs right in that,
okay,
right where the well was, it kind of,
okay,
that's outlined in the map.
okay. So again, Anthony, your question had to do with whether there've been agreements done?
Yeah, just concerned about the legality of it, and if it's doable and dependable. And is this just for conceptual approval, or do we have plans for the size of that transmission main and the ability to pump water from one lot to the next?
Well, that would all be in the, maybe had Mark indicated, that's all in the submittals to Orange County, and I think maybe your approvals would be contingent on their approval. Therefore, they would be reviewing not for a better word, the safe field and the appurtenances in the aspect of the connection. And your concern of has this, the legal issue of it, I think, I know a number of cases where two different properties or multiple properties are supplied by one well.
And would that be considered a public well at that point, or it's a private well and private line?
Well, it's interesting. So we're working on a project in Hamptonburg where Orange County has approved 4 units in a cluster assisted.
Can you sit down by the mic? Thank you.
In a clustered assisted living project. It's a very small project, so public water supply would not be a viable alternative, Anthony. So what's proposed is actually for one well to 2 lots or up to 4 lots. That's what, according to the county, is acceptable by the health department.
And who?
This is a new project, but I know of a number of instances where there are one or multiple properties supplied by a well.
But there's one owner who owns that well and is obligated to provide water to another owner.
That was Harriman Business Park, as originally approved. It ultimately was turned over to the Village of Harriman, but originally was approved with one well to serve the multiple lots and the multiple stores.
Yeah.
In Harriman Business Park, are there wells that are on individual lots that are serving other individual lots?
Again, now it's on municipal water, but
Oh, yeah.
originally there was one well site, it's still visible on the property, that served all of the lots.
Okay.
And it was not, there were multiple lots.
So what if for some unforeseeable reason, the owner of the well is not able to keep up with the maintenance of the well or the maintenance of the line, and the other owner, it depends on that? How
We
what
would
do they
need
do
to
next?
see. and
That's
we'd
why
need
we
to
want an
record
agreement.
An easement and maintenance agreement that would make adequate provision for the ability of the lot, what we call the dominant lot, the lot getting the benefit, to go onto the lands of the servient lot where the well was to carry out the necessary maintenance.
How can the town enforce that, or can enforcement mechanisms be put in there for the town to enforce it? Because if it's between 2 private property owners, what happens if the one doesn't agree with the other, the water is not provided?
I don't know that the town would want to, but we could make provision in the agreement to give the town the authority but not the obligation to do so.
Okay. I think we'll need supervisor of the town board, any thoughts you may have as far as any agreement that needs to be implemented, if the town board's willing to have the change, allowed in the,
I'll have Brian Nugent,
contact us.
supply you with, our thoughts on it.
Okay, thank you. Board members, other questions?
Yes, please. In trying to prepare for tonight's meeting, I came across a document from Atzel, Nasher, and Ziegler dated May 11, 2017, addressing some of the issues that were brought up previously with the planning board. So my understanding is that originally envisioned it was going to be a mikveh and then upstairs a fitness center for the women who also use the mikveh, the women of your congregation, right? I assume, am I following correctly that Mikveh Yisrael will serve congregation Sheri Torah? That's the connection here? Okay. So one of the issues that kind of came up, although it's a little peripheral, is a consideration for a connection for water into the village of Kiryas Joel, which would now be Town of Palm Tree. Had that been looked into as an option?
Yes, that's provided for in the resolution.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's provision for the potential future connection into KJ's water supply in the first amended resolution of approval.
Where is the nearest line leading into KJ?
It would be across Route 17.
So to be able to connect, you would have to basically extend, if this wasn't connected to the school, you would have to go across Route 17 and connect in.
Yeah. It would have to be, a directional, horizontal directional drill underneath, under Route 17.
What is the cost of something like that?
We just recently did it for the KJ Poultry, well located on KJ Poultry. It's approximately, really depends on the soils and so on, but it's roughly, say, $70,000.
70,000.
That's correct, yeah.
And then in addition, you would need DOT approvals to go on the bridge, or no?
No, it would just be, it's a subsurface.
It's a subsurface.
Horizontal, yes. There would be no attachment of the water line to a bridge or anything.
So but you're going under DOT right away?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you would need a DOT approval?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, Glenwood 1 is built, you're working on Glenwood 2. From our meeting at the theater, and we were talking about the growth of youth in the congregation and the need for more class space. Did I remember correctly that you said on that site there was actually the ability to build a Glenwood 3?
Correct.
Okay. So does this take into consideration if conceptually you wind up building a Glenwood 3 that the well would be able to provide for all three of those buildings as well as the mikveh?
Well, the well, when it was originally drilled, was yielded 100 gallons a minute. So we would have to test it again and demonstrate, obviously an increased a yield capacity that would meet the water demands of the four facilities, if you want to include them.
I mean, I'm just thinking based on our discussion that night, your need for classroom space is great. That's why you'd come to us for additional space for trailers and to extend that out, and we had worked on that. But with the consideration of you're going to put classroom space now instead of fitness space above the mikveh to provide for that the likelihood of the need for Glenwood 3 sounds fairly reasonable. One of the things that we talked about that night, it's also in this letter, if I can find it real quick. It was brought up in both this document and that night about a conversation about a master plan for your school system and what you expect the anticipated growth to be and how you plan on meeting that. Both in the document and that night, you mentioned that was in the works. Has any progress been made on that? It's one of those things where I just feel like if we had an idea of what your projections were like going forward, it's a help us, help you kind of thing.
Yes, we're working on the master plan, and we're planning to come in on LAC and on other things there. So our goal is next time when you're coming in on a new project, we're going to come in with a master plan, detail everything, our growth and our plans and our future.
Great, thank you.
Jeff, at some point in answer to your question, and Tom will correct me if I'm wrong, once you get to a certain number of persons on the shared well, it will become what I think the health department calls a communal water supply. It would need an additional level of approval with various safeguards.
Backup water supply,
Yeah,
for example.
right.
Like, yeah. But again, I think in the aspect of your comment and the growth and the water supply to the schools, it would be, as we had discussed all along in this project, and as now we discuss other projects, adjacent to KJ, is the connection to the village involved with that project, and it remains on schedule for approximately, a two-year period, 2 years from now, there should be the connection and to the aqueduct, basically. It's approximately 2 years from now.
Okay, so there's the option that
Yeah.
if need be, and that well has to be devoted to 3 schools now, that I just would hate to see that all of a sudden you didn't have the supply for the mikveh that we had anticipated initially.
Our long run is once the palm tree has a pipeline, then we want to connect everything to them. That's our goal.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'll be in the master plan.
Yeah.
Along with the, water supply, it's just a really an economical thing. When they connect, they don't have to maintain the system. It has to have a licensed operator because of, it is a non-transient, non-community, but it still has to be, it's not their headache anymore.
We don't want to be busy with wells. We
Right.
have municipal water, and on Larkendrecht we have the village's water. So.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have additional questions?
I might have missed this earlier. You said the well near the Route 17 had chlorine issues.
Chloride, yes.
Chloride issue. And then that's the well that we're connecting all this stuff to?
Oh, no.
Or-
That was the proposed,
I remember it.
that
was the higher
That was
level.
the proposed well in the back of the mikveh. That was very close to the 17 corridor.
It's that contamination that requires them to make this change.
And you're going to do the other well, the one
Yes.
down by the trees. Okay. I wanted to make sure I was clear on it.
Are
And then you also have to understand, now you have, there's, again, we have to address the water quality issue in the well for the mikveh, but you also have to understand, in the original thought process, in 2016, when we started the project, the thought process always was to potentially use the well at the school, because now they're operating 2 systems instead of 1. So you have to understand, the cost of running the water main to the mikveh facility. Have to look at the economics in the long term, and and of course, is the well viable at the school? And of course, the documentation documents that it's easily as 10 GPM plus well. So you have now they're operating 1 system, so you have an economic component of it also.
Okay.
Is there a requirement for that well to supply fire flow?
We have extra storage tank on the ground for the 5 flow.
And is that part of the building department review?
It's a part of
Building department
correct.
will review for that adequacy.
Yeah.
The existing wells that have been either drilled as test wells, or that well in particular, which is receiving pollutants, has it been capped? Has it been closed? And
It has a cap on it.
it has a cap, but is it actually like a cap, that's just a cap on top of the well, but it has the well itself, is there bentonite, has
No,
it
so
been?
you're asking, has it been abandoned yet? No, the well's not been abandoned yet.
So, as a potential source of pollution, should it be closed?
Well, certainly, the health department will possibly require that the well be abandoned, but it's the aquifer, it's Route 17 and the road salt application there is the contamination. Just want to make sure the well itself is not a contamination source. It's just the water in the aquifer is polluted and the well
Right.
intersects that water.
So those
Right.
those
I just
wells,
wanted to make
Right, I also want
it's
to,
not, I wouldn't classify it as a source of pollution.
right, but I also don't want it to become a source of pollution. So I would just ask Mark, in terms of some of the conditions, and again, I don't know if Department of Health will or won't address it, but should it actually, that well or any, be closed? I don't know whether you would need it for any reason for well testing in the future, but I just wanted kind of that opinion, whether that should be part of this.
Doesn't Glenwood 1 draw from the same aquifer as the mikveh?
Excuse me?
Wouldn't the Glenwood 1 and 2 draw from the same aquifer and therefore have the same sodium concerns? Chloride
It's
concerns?
at a much significant distance from the Route 17 and much higher in elevation.
Yeah, you were indicating it's over in this area?
Yeah, I think when we measured it, it's like 1,700 feet away.
And Mr. Stern, when you said that the schools had adequate or had provisions for fire supply, each building has its own independent fire protection measures?
We're making each building a separate tank.
Yeah.
For the standpipe from the start.
Thank you.
So, in terms of, this is a site plan amendment, and the regulations do discuss that amendments are treated in the same manner as, I think, original site plans. Is there anything procedurally that has to be done for this site plan amendment? Does it need to go back for GML for any reason if it's an amendment? Is there, did we have an EAF? I don't know that we need an EAF. If it's just utilities, it may be unlisted, or it might be type 2. Is there anything, I'd like to know what we need for you to review this so that the board can take action.
I think generally speaking, the Orange County Planning Department takes the position that even where, as here, they had issued a local determination, they do want to see any amendments to a site plan. So I think the better practice would be to send it to them for follow-up comments. What I want to look at, though, in zoning is whether or not you can waive a site plan public hearing on an amended site plan.
I don't think we require site plan.
Public hearing, in its discretion, may conduct a
Yeah,
public
we
hearing.
don't have to have a
So that's
public hearing.
optional. So
Right.
you should decide at some point whether you want to hold a public hearing.
It would, one alternative would be for them to make an application that references both sites and amends both site plans if the board's willing to take it as a single application. Obviously, they're married at this point, and there's no sense reviewing it twice. It's the same amendment. If you would process it, and then effectively you'd be granting by resolution 2 amendment approvals, but you could take a package, identical packages, and put them in both files. It just has continuity then.
Does the map that you are showing us, does that have the pieces of both properties to show the connections and what's proposed, so that if it says site plan amendment 2 and then both of the...
Yeah, we would just make sure that, well, this plan says Glenwood School and plan to service the mikveh. I would have it revised to be an amended site plan for the 2, and then have a scope on the plan that says this is what's being amended for each application, and then all the backup support information such as the reports, the submittal information, the county health department, all that would become part of a package that you would have one package to process.
Okay,
Because they're so related, it's foolish, in my opinion, to have 2 packages.
right, I would agree.
And then you could just process it as a dual amendment.
Okay.
And you could just put it, 2 resolutions and stick 1 in each file.
Who prepared the Glenwood and the mikveh site plans? Was that Lankin Tully?
The Glenwood is Kirk Rother, and the mikveh was Etzel National Sigler. It's 2 different engineers.
Is there so who prepared that map?
This is Kirk Rother.
Okay, so can you take a look at that Kirk Rother plan and let us know what additional information is needed and what needs to be shown as far as making sure that it is applying to both prior site plan
I think
packages?
if we're very careful to have a note that indicates what the amendment is, we won't be stepping on John Atzel's toes
Mhm.
by amending his plan, because you're really not changing physically his plan. You're just
Right.
using his plan as an overlaying on the location of the proposed water main.
So it's okay to use the Kirk Rother plan?
I believe so, and I don't
long
think
as it
John
shows everything.
would be concerned. I mean, we can check with him and get it on record, but I don't anticipate a concern.
Okay. So let's do this. So Mike, it's your opinion we need to send to the county?
I believe that would be the proper course, and if we're going to technically amend them both, we should send Glenwood
Okay.
as well.
So we're going to take the plan that you provided us, we're going to send it to Orange County Planning Department. They have to do a GML review.
You need an application.
Oh, I thought you had the application.
We should probably make a list up of what the content of the package should include.
Okay.
We listed at least 5 documents you're going to need eventually. We don't need them all up front.
Okay.
But we should find out what we need as far as any amendments to this plan to make it complete to
Okay.
serve as an amendment for both plans, have that submitted, then we can start.
Okay.
The
Isaac, I
process.
thought you had submitted you didn't submit an application
No,
yet.
I didn't submit anything.
Okay.
I would like to, I just discussed it, so I can see what we need, so this is
Okay.
making a full package. Regarding the agreement between the Glenwood and the Mikro, the health department asked us for agreement, so we did the agreement between the Glenwood and the Mikro.
Okay.
Is that okay with the town, or we need some?
Depends on what it says.
We,
It can be.
we need to review it, so,
I will send it to Mike Donnelly to
Send
Yeah.
it to Brian as well, and we'll both look at it.
and we can condition the approval on the proper agreement and have it, subject to the approval of the planning board attorney and the town board attorney and Mark signing off.
Yeah, the original MICFA approval was subject to very similar items. The sewer details, the sewer design, the water design, because there were outstanding determinations to be made. I think a lot of these documents could be part of the conditional approval. One that I am concerned about is just some type of feedback from the health department that they're willing to approve this. I can't see moving forward if we are absolutely unaware of any opinion
Okay.
of the health department. And at
I
that
will make
point-
sure to get in the package some kind of a letter from the health department.
Right.
They-
A letter, email, anything,
We'll make
preferably a letter, but if they're willing to send an email, then, the documents that they're okay. And the email should indicate what they reviewed, because I want to know what they
Ultimately, they
reviewed.
issue a letter of approval. So if there's a letter with approval comments or requirements for a modification, if the scope of the changes are minor in nature, it's pretty clear that they
We have that.
haven't rejected the proposal.
Okay.
We submitted a plan, or we just responded to comments.
Okay,
So I think like Mark is saying, we submitted it and it wasn't a viable alternative, they would have said.
Okay.
We're just addressing comments to go for final approval.
okay. So Mark, perhaps between yourself and Mike, we can come up with a list, get the application in right away, so we can send it off to the county. We need the map to be sent up to the county. And we need to see whatever agreements there may be, so they can be reviewed. And we'll continue to process this.
Well, I already had secret, it was on listed on a negative declaration that we reaffirmed once.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Members, questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, have a good
Thank you,
night.
guys.
Is there any reason for them to be on the Tuesday agenda at this point?
We've got-
Okay.
We've got work to do.
All right, thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Next item on the agenda is Kingsville Synagogue. Anyone here for Kingsville? Nope. Dave, okay. Lakeside?
Nope.
Still no Lakeside. Meadow Hill, Hillside and Scott? That's, okay, come on up, gentlemen.
All right, time's up.
Come on up, whoever's representing the application.
Tom DePiero. Tom.
You're on.
You're on, Tom.
Gonna close the meeting before you get up here.
And while we're waiting, there are no minutes to approve, so this is, I think, the last time on the agenda, if no one else is attending. Good evening.
Now we're doing
Tom Skew, the applicant here.
Okay. And your name is, sir?
My name is I.W. Liu.
Hi, W. Lou. Okay.
Yeah, we're back in front of the board. This project's been going on for a long time. We had gotten numerous extensions, and then we got caught up in the moratorium. The only item we had at the time was bonding issues, which we were ready to bond, and that's where we got stuck and got in the moratorium, and we're back in front of the board.
So could you explain your application and what's being proposed?
Okay. We had gotten final approval. There was 3 parcels of land, It was 3 parcels of land, and we were consolidating them and putting them into 5 lots. So actually, we've always called it a 5-lot subdivision, but actually was creating
2 additional lots, so it was actually 2 lots. So basically, they're located on Hillside and Scott, and they all fit in at the time to the requirements of the lot sizes. We also were granted variances on them at the time, which still run with the land, and it also gave us rights onto the private roads and how we had to develop the roads too. So that was all laid out in the variances. So basically, this is the overall project. So these are the 5 lots. We would have central sewer for them. We were granted approval by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation for sewer line extensions. We also, since it was a 5-lot subdivision, we had gotten realty subdivisions from the Health Department, and we also did an extensive water study on the wells and the quality of water. So, and that was all put on record. The developer did have to file a developer's agreement, which would run with each of the lots, explaining the costs of the water treatment. That was an issue at the time, because we're going to have reverse osmosis treatment on the wells because of the salt.
And you also prepared, and I believe recorded, or at least was approved for recording a private roadway use and maintenance agreement.
Yes, that was also recorded.
So the big issue here is that they weren't grandfathered. And we have new zoning regulations in place. And if a 5-lot subdivision is considered a major subdivision, you're required to submit, I believe, a cluster layout and an analysis of environmental conditions there.
It won't work.
So,
It's a moot point.
well, it may be a moot point, but so we have to deal with the regulations.
Okay.
So I have-
variances on it at the
Right.
time.
So-
We're still running with the land.
So I have to ask my professionals what to do, because I don't know if maybe this is something you have to go to the town board for, or if there is in some way the ability to prove this.
Let's let Tom drill down a little bit on his comment that he's only creating 2 new lots.
Okay.
Because if it's a 2-lot subdivision and a lot line change
Right.
to realign existing lots, it may in fact not be a 5-lot subdivision.
Okay.
And they may, by the skin of their teeth, not necessarily have that section of the new code apply. So why don't you try to convince the board if that's in fact the case, because,
Yeah, so, yeah, let me just go back up on the previous. This is the original lot alignment, and we're basically, we're creating, it is a lot line change, and we're creating 2 additional lots with a lot line change on this one and this one here, basically. So we're really only creating 2 additional lots at the time.
No.
What got us caught up in with the health department, they came back and told us that they wanted to view it as a 5-lot subdivision. So that's kind of why we've always called it a 5-lot subdivision, which got us into the realty subdivision approval part too. So
I think for
we
them,
really-
that's because they were going to assign 5 tax map
Parcels to-
numbers. But
Yes, so we kind of got forced into calling a 5-lot subdivision at one time.
and did they not review the treatment systems on all 5 lots?
All 5 lots.
So they wanted to collect the fees on 5 lots, because they had 5 lots to review.
Review.
So they were reviewing 5 lots from a subdivision standpoint.
Right.
You're creating 2 new lots with a series of lot line changes for the 3 existing lots.
Right.
a major subdivision is defined in the subdivision regulations, and this is very helpful, as any subdivision not classified as a minor subdivision. But a minor subdivision is any subdivision containing not more than 4 lots fronting on an existing street, not involving any new street or road or the extension of municipal facilities, and not adversely affecting the development of the remainder of the parcel or adjoining property, and not in conflict with any provisions or portions of the master plan, official map, or the zoning chapter. And no, it doesn't say creating. It says any subdivision containing not more than 4 lots. Or it seems to comply with the remainder of it to fit into that definition.
So this definitely, the cluster provisions apply to major subdivisions. So if,
But Tom can try to show why he can't present a cluster, because it doesn't work. I mean, if the
Right.
only catch of calling it a major is that he has to present a cluster alternative, all he need to do is demonstrate that a
What-
cluster is not possible.
What's the total acreage here that's involved?
About,
Are you under 5?
oh, yeah.
Then I think we can waive it.
So, yeah, we're, I believe we're only 81,000 square feet. And all done.
So our regulations say that the planning board, although they don't have to, they can waive the requirement of a cluster plan submission for subdivisions involving 5 acres or less.
All right.
So, does the board have any thoughts as far as whether we should waive the cluster? Again, the history is this was already final approval subject to conditions or preliminary approval?
We had final approval. The only condition we had left was the bonding, and that's when we got caught up into the moratorium and it didn't get bonded, so we're
Right.
There's some other items that we have to address, but let's first deal with the cluster. Anyone have an issue? Anyone feel strongly that they should submit a cluster? Or would it be acceptable in this instance, given the specifics of this application, to waive the cluster
Can you
layout?
bring up the plan again?
Mhm.
No.
Do you want me to blow it up a little more?
No, that's fine.
Big one on the bottom.
Are there much in the way of steep slopes here? Wetlands?
No, no. We had gone all through that, and there was no steep slopes
Oh, wetlands.
or wetlands. No.
So, since I haven't heard from anybody, Anthony, any other comments? No.
I just want to say,
Sure.
I mean, I think that it makes sense in this case to waive that requirement, if for no other reason than a traditional layout is much more in keeping with this area of town. I mean, even as you look at, I'm somewhat familiar with this area, and the way they're proposing fits into the neighborhood, and a cluster might be
not.
odd.
Right. So I'm going to make a motion that we entertain waiving a cluster submission for this application because the site is less than 5 acres and because the lot layout as it currently exists would be in keeping with the overall community character and other lots within that neighborhood. May I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Could you do a roll?
Anthony Vaccaro,
Aye.
Bonnie Franson,
Aye.
James McKnight,
Aye.
Jeff Manson,
Aye.
Lisa McQuaid,
Aye.
John Allegro, sorry. And Jason Zaborski. I'm like, I missed somebody.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, so no clusters required. The
You held
next,
2 public hearings on this application, because this was actually approved twice.
Twice.
okay.
There was a public hearing held in 2012, and after it lapsed and was reapproved, a second public hearing was held in 2015.
So the,
2014.
then the only other thing I would like you to look at in detail, and for Mark and Mike to look at in detail, is there are some new provisions about setbacks, undersized lots. I know you have variances,
Yes.
but I just want to make sure that there aren't any other sections that are new to the new zoning that would in some way affect your subdivision layout.
Okay.
And I think, because I don't think that's occurred, my question would be, do you all think you could take a look at that between now and Tuesday?
Yes.
I'm
I think
relying
the
on,
first step
I'm
would be
not-
for Tom to review the table and show us that there is full compliance. In other words, update your table to correspond to the new
New
quote
code.
table.
right, if there's impervious, we regulate impervious surface coverages. If there's any front yard or yard requirement differences, we need you to look at that in detail.
Okay.
And after that, Mark will look at it.
Okay.
All right.
Can you do that for Tuesday?
Yeah, I believe we can do that.
So I know Mark or Mike may not be able to look at it, but that, we can at least continue this conversation.
Okay. All right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So I think with that, that's about what we can do this evening, or
Right,
Mark?
there's one change that, because of, you probably heard early in the discussion tonight, that there was a change with the state code for roads, for private roads.
Right.
You've got the shoulders that are 2 or 3 feet
Right.
with the 24-foot improved road.
Right.
What you need to do is add a foot on each side. you need to have 26 foot.
26 foot.
So you can just modify that detail. You've got the room, the shoulders, it's just be a little smaller.
Right.
Peculiarity in the state code is that the road width as measured for compliance excludes specifically shoulders.
Shoulders, yeah.
So,
Okay.
Well, they usually don't get developed at the same depth and
Yeah,
don't,
right.
don't support.
so just
fire
show the
roads.
finished surface
Okay.
a foot wider on each side, and I think we meet the requirements of the state code for the private roads for access.
Okay.
Okay,
So again, just look in detail and then get back to us on Tuesday.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bonnie?
Yes.
One last thing, if I may?
Sure, sure.
Just real quick, I was breezing through your application package, and my favorite hot button topic. The town of Monroe, since they implemented the entity disclosure form, in section B, there's an LLC, that's the ownership. So the member or members' information should be listed in section B.
Okay, very good.
So
So I-
all
no-
members,
What?
all members.
All members? Okay, yes, all right,
Thank you.
okay.
Anyone else? No. And we're going to carry this over to Tuesday. So if you haven't had a chance to review this and you want to, we're going to carry this on to Tuesday. Okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Anything else? I think that's the last item on our agenda. Anything, Mark or Mike, you want to raise at this point? No? Members, any questions, any comments? No? No? All right. With that, I will entertain a motion if someone wants to adjourn this meeting and make a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.